Hello viewers, welcome to CEC Gurukul Lectures. I am Dr. Sanavar Soham from Department of Botany, Kalindi College, University of Delhi, and I will be taking up taxonomic evidences and their utilization in solving the taxonomic problems. In the previous lecture, I had given few examples from various fields of biology, and in this lecture, I will be moving on to the knowledge of chromosome numbers that have helped to solve the various taxonomic problems. Now, many interesting ideas have developed from the knowledge of chromosome numbers. For example, in the genus Festuca, different species have different chromosome numbers forming the mathematical series, and the chromosome numbers are 2n is equal to 14, 28, 42, 56 and 70. From this information, a generalization can be made that different species have some common basis. Now, if we assume that these chromosome numbers are based on a common denominator called x, where x is equivalent to 7, then we can consider the different species to have multiples of this number. The denominator or the base number 7 can be considered as the basic set of genetic information carried by a plant, and due to the multiplication of this basic genetic set, the evolution of different species has occurred. Such a series is said to be polyploid, in which the basic number x is equivalent to the haploid number of the chromosome in a diploid species. The other species would then be either tetraploid if the 4x is 2n, hexaploid, octaploid, decaploid respectively. Now, cytologists have studied chromosome morphology and have pointed out that the most interesting feature about the chromosome structure is the position of the centromere. And this position of centromere has also helped to solve the taxonomic problems. The centromere or constriction in the length of the chromosome provides information about the relationship of two arms of the chromosomes. Now, depending upon the position of the centromere, the chromosomes can be described, as you can see in the figure, as acrocentric, the figure C, metacentric, figure B, and telocentric, figure A. Although we know that metacentric chromosomes are considered to be more advanced than the acrocentric chromosomes. Now, the appearance of the basic chromosome set in a dividing cell is known as the karyotype of the cell, and this can be analyzed to provide information not only of the chromosome number but also about the chromosome size, chromosome volume and type of the chromosomes in the cells, and this information is used by taxonomists for identifying plants and understanding the relationships. The karyotype can be represented diagrammatically as an ideogram or karyogram, and these diagrams can be compared for taxonomic purposes. Another interesting observation is that the absolute size of the chromosome of a karyotype is fairly constant since it is controlled by the genotype. So, the taxonomists have found that the monocots generally have larger chromosomes than the dicots, and the smaller chromosomes are found in hardwood plants in comparison to their herbaceous relatives. So, now here you have found out this interesting observation which has helped to solve many puzzles. Let us now describe some examples where chromosome structures have been successfully used as taxonomic evidences. Paeonia was earlier placed in Ranunculacea, and I had already discussed this when I was talking about the embryological evidences. However, on the basis of the embryological and other evidences, it is suggested that it should be placed as an independent family, Paeoniaceae. Now, We will move on to the chromosomal structures, where cytologically it is found that Paeonia possesses large chromosomes as opposed to the smaller chromosomes that are characteristics of members of the family Ranunculaceae. The chromosome karyotype studies have suggested placing the genus Botomus, this is another example, wherein a separate family Butomaceae, while retaining Limnocharis, Hydrocharis and Tinagocharis in the family Alismataceae. Closer affinities of the families Cyperaceae and Juncaceae have been established due to the presence of holocentric chromosome in their members. Karyotype studies have confirmed that the separation of family Agavaceae from Amaryllidaceae, presence of 5 large and 25 small chromosomes in their cells have helped transfer of Eucha from the family Liliaceae to the family Agavaceae. When we study meiosis, we not only observe the regularity of pairing, which is important for the fertility of plants, we are also able to make a chromosome to chromosome comparison. This provides valuable information about the role of chromosomes in heredity. Now, taxonomists use this information to understand relationships among different species of plants. We can also determine the nature of the genome to find out that if it is homozygous or heterozygous. Genome analysis in plant taxonomy has been particularly useful in understanding polyploidy and for establishing the percentage of polyploids. A very significant study in this regard is the case of common hexaploid breadweed Triticum aestivum. The genome of this economically important plant has been designated as AABBDD with 2n is equal to 42. Detailed genome analysis have established that 3 diploid species have contributed to the evolution of this hexaploid wheat. The A genome is from the Wildglass Aegilops peltoides with chromosome number 2n is equal to 14. The D genome has been contributed by Aegilops squarosa with 2n is equal to 14. Many geneticists have suggested different grasses as the source of the B genome. Finally, we must remember that as with any other character, the value of cytotaxonomic data depends upon the group or category under investigation. A combination of cytological information with data from other disciplines will provide a more useful tool to the taxonomist. Now, we will move on to the taxonomic evidences from another field of biology, which is phytochemistry. But before that, let's understand what is chemotaxonomy. Now, chemotaxonomy is a science which uses chemical information as a character for taxonomic purposes. Before we analyze the basis of this modern trend in plant taxonomy, let us for a moment think about different kinds of plants in our daily lives. When we drink tea or coffee, we appreciate the flavor and aroma and differentiate the two by this character. Similarly, when we eat fruits such as mango, banana, apple, we find that they taste differently. Now, these differences are due to chemical constituents of these foods, and this forms the basis of chemotaxonomy, where the chemical features and chemical constituents serve as the evidence for the taxonomy. Now, potential importance of chemical evidence in plant taxonomy has been suggested by both botanists and chemists, and this has become an important recent trend, especially because newer techniques for quick analysis of plant material have been developed. Chemotaxonomists suggest that chemical characters have a particularly high taxonomic value because first, they are stable, They are unambiguous and not easily changeable. Further, the chemical characters tell about the chemical relationship amongst plants in the same way as morphological characters show morphological relationships. Although theoretically, all chemical constituents of plants are potentially valuable to a taxonomist, in practice, some kinds of molecules are more useful than the others. Thus, we can use directly visible constituents, chemical constituents such as crystals, raphides, starch grains occurring in different plants as the chemical characters. Alternatively, we can also analyze chemical plant material for different chemical constituents and use this information for taxonomic purposes. Most chemotaxonomists recognize three broad categories of chemical compounds which are of taxonomic importance, and they are primary metabolites, secondary metabolites, and cementitides. Now, I will begin with the directly visible chemical characters and how they have been useful in studying the taxonomy. Very few chemical substances in plants can be observed directly, but a few substances such as starch grains, which are present in most green plants as food reserves, have been used for chemotaxonomic purpose. This type of starch grains present different plants are very specific, and this information can be used without ambiguity. Research examined starch grains in 350 species of plants and established the differentiation and specificity of occurrence in relation to genera and species, thus providing chemotaxonomic information. Tetioka reviewed the starch grain form in grass family Poaceae and used this as an additional information to classify family into tribes. For example, in the tribe Hordeae, the typical members such as Hordeum have compound starch grains, while other genera like Lolium, Nardus, and Papapholius have simple starch grains. Moving on to next set of these visible characteristics, raphides. They are crystals of calcium oxalate which are present in large cells in different plant tissues and can be observed directly. They are long needle-shaped crystals pointed at both ends and usually occur in bundles, thus being easily identified. Now, they occur very commonly in some aquatic plants such as Pistia and Eichhornia, and also found in members of Araceae family. The presence or absence of raphides is a key character in natural classification of family Rubiaceae, along with some other ones. All those Rubiaceae members that possess raphides are placed in the tribe Rubioideae. Now, another example where raphides have been proven taxonomically important is the subdivision of the order Scytaminae. The raphides are present in the families Heliconiaceae, Musaceae, Sterliziaceae, and Loiaceae. Further, classification within these families is based on another taxonomic feature. On the other hand, within order Scytaminae, the families Costaceae, Marentaceae, Zinziperaceae, and Cinaceae, the raphides are absent. Now, we'll move on to druses. They are another kind of crystals which are made up of calcium oxalate, and they also provide taxonomic evidence. A druse is an aggregate or conglomerate of large number of crystals, as you had seen in the diagram. They are characteristic of families Caricaceae, Apocynaceae, etc. Now, we'll move on to the presence of crystals of gypsum, a soft mineral which is made up of calcium sulfate, and it is important characteristic of family Tamariaceae. As the name indicates, Primary metabolites are molecules which are involved in vital metabolic pathways. Now, we had already discussed about various structures which are present in the cells that help in identification. Now, I am moving on to the primary metabolites, which now how we'll see the example how they will help us in solving the taxonomic problems and help in classification. So, as the name suggests, primary metabolites are the molecules involved in vital metabolic pathways. They are of universal occurrence and are not very significant in chemotaxonomy. However, these molecules become useful as taxonomic features when the quantity of such molecule varies considerably between the taxa. For example, the sugar pseudohaptulose is stored in large quantities as a reserve food in the genus Sedum. Thus, members of this genus can be easily identified by the presence of this primary metabolite. Interestingly, pseudohaptulose biphosphate is a part of photosynthetic carbon cycle, and in majority of plants, pseudohaptulose does not accumulate at all. In the same way, the 22 amino acids are of universal occurrence. They also serve as building blocks of proteins, so they can also provide useful molecular data for chemotaxonomy. The amino acid sequence of different proteins can be investigated, and the degree of similarity is presumably proportional to the degree of genetic relationship. However, only a few of about 3 lakh species of angiosperms have been analyzed for amino acid sequences. For example, the amino acid data on wheat and barley confirms the relationship of these genera as suggested by classical taxonomists. Now, if I talk of secondary metabolites, the secondary metabolites are the secondary plant products, and these are the macromolecules that lack nitrogen and are of restricted occurrence and therefore of greater taxonomic importance than the primary metabolites which I just discussed. Now, this group includes different kinds of compounds such as flavonoids, terpenes, iridoids, alkaloids, anthocyanins, glucosinolates, cyanogenic glycosides, polyacetylens, etc. They are usually not involved in vital functions and are largely storage products or the pigments. Now, amongst the secondary metabolites, flavonoids, which are the commonest phenolic compounds of leaves, this we very well know, have been useful for chemotaxonomic purposes. Both monocots and dicots have been extensively surveyed for these compounds, which show structural variability and chemical stability besides widespread distribution. They can be rapidly and easily identified and provide important chemical characters for taxonomic purposes. For example, 80 species of plants from the family Ulmaceae were investigated for their flavonoid chemistry. Majority of the species contain flavonols, but a few species have glycoflavanols, and these two types of flavonoid compounds are never present together in any species. Interestingly enough, in most classical systems of classification, the family Ulmaceae is divided into two subfamilies, that is, Ulmoideae and Celtoideae, which are also distinguishable by this flavonoid chemistry. Therefore, morphological criteria combined with the flavonoid dichotomy can be used to divide the family Ulmaceae into two distinct families. Family Ulmaceae is characterized by the presence of flavonols, and another one being family Celtaceae, which is characterized by the presence of glucoflavanols. Several other studies have used flavonoid chemistry for taxonomic purposes in families such as Aralidaceae, Cornaceae, Labiatae, Leguminosae, Orchidaceae, Rutaceae, Lamnaceae and others. Although useful in assessing relationship among closely related species, flavonoids are occasionally useful in assessing even the phylogenetic relationship at higher levels. Then a second group of secondary metabolites commonly examined by chemotaxonomic are terpenes. Now, volatile terpenes are the major components of essential oils, which are characteristics of the order Magnoliales, Austrobaileales, Piperales and Laurales. They are also reported in the family Myrtaceae, Rutaceae, Apiaceae, Lamiaceae and Asteraceae. Chemically speaking, these compounds can be classified on the basis of their molecular structure into monoterpenes, diterpenes, triterpenes, sesquiterpenes, etc. And each group can be used for taxonomic purposes. For example, in the genus Salvia, 19 species could be distinctly identified and classified just on the basis of their monoterpenes. The terpene composition was as useful as morphological characteristics in the analysis of interrogression and hybridization within the genus. Similarly, triterpenes and sesquiterpenes have been particularly important and useful in the classification of families Cucurbitaceae and Compositae respectively. Now, another set of secondary metabolites is iridoids. They are 9 to 10 carbon monoterpoid derivatives, and they are commonly found in plant grouped as esterids. So, they have helped to identify and classify and demarcate this group from rest of the groups. Betalains are nitrogenous red and yellow colored pigments and are restricted to the order Caryophyllales, except the families Caryophyllaceae and Molaginaceae. Then third set is anthocyanins. These in contrast are red, yellow, blue or purple pigments of most other plants. Both betalains and anthocyanins, which I just mentioned, are mutually exclusive as they have never been found together in the same species. Now, alkaloids are structurally diverse chemicals that are derived from amino acids or from mevalonic acids. These alkaloids have also helped a lot in understanding of taxonomic relationships. Cocaine, morphine, codeine, atropine, colchicine, quinines are some important alkaloid plant products. Now, the plant groups where they are biosynthesized represent a vast diversity, hence they are of little systemic interest. Now, moving on to glucosinolates. Now, glucosinolates are also known as mustard oil glucosides. They are hydrolyzed by the enzymes known as myrocinases to yield pungent mustard oil. They are characteristic of Brassicaceae, Vicidaceae and Tovariaceae. Then another set of secondary metabolites is cyanogenic glycosides. They are defensive compounds and they are hydrolyzed by various enzymes to release hydrogen cyanide. The process cyanogenesis is widespread in angiosperms. Leucine derived cyanogenic glycoside is common in the families Rosaceae, Fabaceae, Sapindaceae. In the orders Magnoliales and Laurales, these compounds are derived from amino acid tyrosine. Now, another group is polyacetylenes, and they are a large group of non-nitrogenous secondary metabolites. They are formed by linking of acetate units via fatty acids. Taxonomically, they are important because of the presence in related groups of asteroid families such as Asteraceae, Apiaceae, Campaniulaceae, Caprifoliaceae, etc. The information carrying molecules in plants are called sementids. Now, this is the third segment where we will be talking about another set of molecules, sementids, which have helped in solving chemotaxonomic problems. The information carrying molecules in plants, sementids, are recognized to be of three kinds, that is DNA or deoxyribonucleic acid known as primary sementide, ribonucleic acid or RNA known as secondary sementide, and proteins, the tertiary sementide, following the sequential transfer of genetic code. Of these, the proteins are the most favored molecules for chemical taxonomic purposes. Plant proteins can be studied by different methods, electrophoresis or by serological methods, and both processes have been used for obtaining information about the protein chemistry of different plants. In the common breadwheat Triticum aestivum, the storage proteins were analyzed by electrophoresis. For comparative purposes, the storage proteins of this tetraploid wheat Triticum dicoccum and the diploid grass Aegilops squarosa were also analyzed electrophoretically. The study confirmed the conclusion that the hexaploid wheat did not contain the sum of proteins which were possessed by the diploid species, which have contributed to the evolution of hexaploid wheat. This study supports the observations based on morphology and cytological evidence. If we move on to the serological analysis of proteins, it is based on the immunological reaction shown by mammals when a foreign protein is introduced into the system. In other words, this is based on the antibody-antigen reaction, wherein the antibodies being specific to an antigen brings about coagulation. This information can then be analyzed to understand the relationships of different plants on the basis of the serological evaluation of the plant proteins. Serology has proved a useful taxonomic tool at different levels of classification. J.J. Hawkes and his co-workers studied several tuber-producing species of Solanum to understand the evolution of cultivated potato, Solanum tuberosum, and determine the species Solanum, which could be established as the ancestors of the common cultivated potato that we use. Similarly, in the family Ranunculaceae, serological studies supported cytological data for the classification of the family into tribes and genera. Fairbrother and his co-workers have studied several plant groups serologically, particularly the members of the grass family. A general conclusion from such studies is that different amount of serological activity in the members of different plant families may be interpreted as a reflection of the evolutionary differences in the primary structure of the proteins, due to which serological differences can be recognized between members of different families. So, I will take a rest from the lecture and will be discussing the taxonomic evidences from molecular data in the next upcoming lecture. Thank you.